You made it. You've arrived. This is Peter Levitan's Advertising Stories. And you're about to hear entertaining, personal, often instructive stories from deep inside the world of advertising.
Hi, folks. Welcome to episode 30 of Advertising Stories. This is an interview with Dominic Rinaldi, who is the president and managing partner of Sun Acquisitions, which is an M&A firm, which means we're going to talk about mergers and acquisitions today, how they get done, what are obligations of buyers and sellers, how to set up a business for sale, contingency plans, given that we're in the middle of this coronavirus situation. A quick bit about me. I have bought and sold 3 advertising agencies, started 2 companies with venture capital money, and recently wrote a book, How to Sell an Advertising Agency and How to Buy One. That's my reason for talking to Dominic. I will also have a couple of more interviews with M&A specialists coming up, but you'll really dig what Dominic has to say, so let's get on with it. Dominic Rinaldi, where are you?
Chicago, Illinois.
It is a nice, this is the right time of the year for anyone listening to this podcast in 6 months. We're talking in August, which means it's hot and humid.
It's beautiful, actually. We've had great weather. It's been an awesome summer.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm happy for you. You are the president and managing partner of Sun Acquisitions. What does that mean? What do you guys do? Did I say it right? What do you guys do?
Yeah. So we're a lower middle market mergers and acquisitions firm. In a nutshell, we help people buy and sell largely privately held companies throughout the Midwest and the United States.
And how do you explain what you do to a seller? So let's say I called you up and I said, I'm a PR agency and I want to sell my company. What would you then say to me that you're going to do for me to make me feel wonderful at the end of the process?
Well, but before I tell you what I can do for you, I'm going to want to learn a lot more about your agency and your business and how you operate it and what the history of it has been. So, because it's not a one size fits all. You really have to understand what's happening with the business and whether or not it's potentially even the right time for an owner to consider selling the business. And so we'll do a pretty in-depth consultation with an owner to really understand where they're at. And at the end of that, we should be able to provide them a pretty good overview as to the steps that we would take if they were interested in going down the path. And at a high level, the steps are we would do a deep dive evaluation on the business from many angles to understand, is it sellable? Will there be buyers for it? What's the value of the business? And is it likely that a bank loan could be secured by anybody looking to acquire the business? So that we know what kind of asset we have. And then beyond that, if they decide that all of those things line up, we think we're a good fit for them, they think we're a good fit, then we would take it to market. And that's a 6 to 18 month process from there.
Are banks friendly these days?
Very much so. Interest rates are low. There's still a lot of liquidity. The capital markets are wide open. So it continues to be a good time. Now, I am a little worried, I will say, given, looming bankruptcies that are out there and what that's going to mean to the balance sheets of a lot of these banks and lenders. But at the moment, we are getting deals done. They are getting financed by banks. So the markets are still very favorable.
Now, I've bought and sold 3 agencies. I never borrowed money. I never went to a bank, never incurred the banking experience. What percentage of sales of your market, middle and lower, require borrowing from a bank?
Over 90%.
Okay.
Even the largest, most sophisticated buyers want to borrow money because they want to put leverage on that deal. So let's talk in terms of like a sophisticated private equity group that's looking to make acquisitions. If they have $200 million in a fund and they're looking to go out and make acquisitions, they don't want to do 10 transactions with the 200 million. They want to do 100 transactions. So they're spreading their risk. The chances are they're going to hit a couple of home runs and hit a couple of, doubles and triples. Whereas if they do 10 deals, the odds of success, really shrink. So using the money to do as many deals as possible, putting bank lending on it, gives them leverage to do that. And at today's interest rates, it makes a lot of sense.
So it's intelligent roulette. I mean,
I don't know that they would agree with that, but
no.
It's putting leverage on a deal, right? So you have to be comfortable knowing that you're going to have debt, and you believe the business can support the debt and provide a return for your investors or yourself if you happen to be buying for yourself.
I get it. So let me go back to you're helping me with a definition. You are an M&A company, which means merger and or acquisition. What is the difference? And I'll explain after you help me. I'll explain something I did, which I can't tell the difference whether it was a merger or an acquisition. What are the difference between those two terms?
Yeah. So, in the most simplistic, and by the way, there's, as you can imagine, there's a ton of gray here, but in the most simplistic terms, an acquisition means you're making an outright purchase of a business. You are taking over control, probably buying 100% of the business. In a merger, you're bringing two companies together, probably in some sort of equal parts, and literally bringing those two entities together to operate as one. So it might be a subtle difference, but economically, it could be a very big difference.
The reason I asked that question is that I sold an agency a few years ago, and I essentially turned the whole business. It was a good deal because the buying agency was in the same town. They essentially bought my clients. They took all of my staff, which meant I could legitimately go to a client and say, "You're safe."
Mm-hmm.
Sarah worked on your business. Sarah's still working on your business.
Yeah.
And I took an earn out. So was that a merger or was that an acquisition?
In my terminology, that was an acquisition. They bought 100% of the assets or the stock, whatever it was, and brought it into their business. They made an acquisition under my terminology.
Okay, got it. How often does an owner have to stick around?
Completely depends on how the business is being operated, what the prospects are, what the owner's wishes are, right? Do they want to stick around? Do they want to exit stage left? So so many factors go into that. But know this, that as an owner, the more active you are in the business, the more roles you play, the more decisions you make, the higher the likelihood is that you're going to have to stick around for a longer period of time, because the risk in the transition goes way up if you're very active in the business, and the buyers are going to want to mitigate that risk. And the surest way to mitigate it is keep the current owner around for some extended period of time to make sure that there's a orderly and transparent transition.
One of the things I did in that sale, because I knew both my rational and emotional needs, which were essentially to get out of the advertising business at that point and do other things in my life, was that I'd say about a year before the transaction occurred, at least a year before, I started exiting day-to-day management of individual accounts. And I'm talking about some major accounts. We had Nike, we had a 5-state healthcare account, LegalZoom, I could go down the list. I did not want them calling me up because I knew at the time I was going to sell, that I wanted to split. It's like, I think I stayed at the agency 3 months, twiddling my thumbs, going out to lunch, because I had set it up that way. Are you seeing sellers doing that, or do they like to stick around so they can make sure that the acquiring business is, let's say, doing the right things to keep their accounts intact, or whatever business they have?
First off, kudos to you. You are in the small minority of owners who get this and who work their way out of the business so that the business isn't dependent on them. In fact, in my several decades of helping people buy and sell businesses, the biggest thing that I've seen time and time again is people don't properly prepare, whether they're looking to buy or sell, so they can maximize their return and minimize their risk. And that is what caused us actually earlier this year to launch a new business, something I've been wanting to do for a long time. But we launched a new business earlier this year. And the sole purpose of that business is to help people prepare for the exit or prepare to make an acquisition. And we cover things like what you're talking about. We help owners understand how to relinquish control of certain aspects of the business. And we show them how by relinquishing control, the value of their business actually goes up. And so seeing that movie play out, the movie being owners not really preparing, seeing it happen so many times, we finally decided to launch this other business.
And what is that business called?
It's called K2 Advisor, ADVISER, K2advisor.com.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, anybody who's listening, if they're looking to buy or sell, there are a couple free assessments on that site. You could go take the assessments. It takes like 5 minutes, and you'll get an instant score that will tell you how ready you really are to exit a business or to buy a business.
Well, I'll give you, I normally try not to do this. I'm going to give you a compliment. Having a website, a digital entity that has some form of calculator. What was the word you just used?
Assessment.
Assessment. Yeah. Has a tool like that is fabulous. It's sort of like trying to figure out how much money to put in a kid's college education fund, right? Calculator. The other thing you do, which is great, is you have a podcast, M&A Unplugged, and you have a blog that you seem to fill up, keep it full up. So the compliment is, I'm not sure there are that many mergers and acquisitions people that are doing as much marketing as you're doing. So as a marketer, it's my nature to recognize that and appreciate it. So more power to you on that front.
Well, thank you very much. It seems like an elusive, ever-changing footprint, but you have to be active in all of these aspects these days, and especially digitally, to be seen and to remain relevant. And I have to admit, it takes a lot of time, but I think it pays off at the end of the day.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't want to get off in this direction too much, but people's attention is so split. There are so many things that they're doing that it's difficult for marketers to figure out what to do first, second, third, how much of each. I'll just say that I started, years ago in advertising when there were 3 television stations or networks. We spent $200,000 to $500,000 on a TV commercial, and everyone saw it after the first week. I mean, those, other than the Tiger King, nobody's watching everything. So that's cool. All right, I wanted to move into. I made a note earlier. I was getting a yogurt, and I thought of a word that was, at least to me, interesting: obligations. What are the different obligations of a buyer and a seller in a transaction?
Well, so it depends on the agreements that are executed, and the big caveat that I'm going to offer here is don't do a transaction without an experienced M&A attorney. And there are a lot of attorneys out there that are tremendous at what they do, but if they don't live and breathe mergers and acquisitions, skip to the next person, because you really need somebody who specializes in this area, or it could potentially cost you a lot of money down the road. So there are pre-deal obligations, and then there are post-deal obligations. Pre-deal obligations can be pretty simple. Like on the seller's side, it could be things like run your business in the normal course. Don't communicate this to anybody. Maintain confidentiality around the fact that we're, looking to purchase you. Give us, true and accurate statements. From a buyer's perspective, their obligations might be to move quickly within a certain time frame, to also not disclose any of the facts of the deal, to line up their banking in a certain period of time. So it's obligations like that. But then if you get to the closing table, there are post-closing obligations that come in the form of reps and warranties, representations and warranties. And typically those representations and warranties can be pages long, depending on the complexity of the deal. And example of a representation and warranty from a seller's perspective are, I had clear title to all of the assets to sell them to you. Every piece of information I gave you is materially accurate. And I haven't attempted to, defraud you or feed you, false information. And the list goes on and on and on. And the consequences for, not living up to those representations and warranties can, come in different forms, some financial and some other. And so, your attorney will know what is appropriate, what's market for the size of your transaction. And on the buyer's side, the buyer has obligations as well, representations and warranties. Not nearly as many as the seller, but they will have obligations as well.
Do people remember all of these legal stipulations down the road? I used to work at the largest agency in the world, and during our acquisition phase, and I would see these documents, and I go, certainly in the marketing industry, advertising industry, nobody read them after they walked out of the room. How do laymen deal with the stuff that lawyers write?
Yeah, I think, so here's where a good attorney is really worth their salt, right? It'll be in legalese, but an attorney should be able to sit down with their client and say, all right, here's what this really says, and here's what this really means. And they should be walking a client through the material items in the contract. But truth be told, people typically buy or sell a business once in their lifetime. You've done it 3 times. You've done it way more than most, but most owners and acquirers do it once or twice in their lifetime, and they're going to forget everything that was in that contract. The only time it's going to matter is if there was a suspected breach of one of those reps and warranties, and they get a phone call. Then everybody will be scrambling to find those documents and read what was in them and call the attorney that did the deal to explain what's going on. But truth be told, once the deal gets signed, I don't think anybody's thinking or reviewing those documents.
Are there any significant red flags that you see early in a discussion / transaction from both sides? Just something that you see often that says, okay, let's stop.
Yeah, I would say that if from a financial perspective, if the numbers start as the buyers dig in and the numbers look off, you certainly can be come to a halt and pencils are put down on the deal. So financials are typically one of the biggest reasons a deal will come to a screeching halt. If there's been some material change in the business, like the top client provided notice that they may be terminating their contract. Things like that will really, cause a deal to be put, on the skids immediately. From a seller's perspective, if a buyer comes and tries to renegotiate the deal, so everybody agreed and had a handshake on paper as to what the deal terms were going to be, and the buyer goes through their deal diligence, And unless they found something materially different than what the seller had told them up front and they try to renegotiate, that will typically cause a seller to halt and take pause and decide whether or not they want to continue with the transaction. And then the other thing I'll mention, and I've mentioned it earlier in this conversation, but I'm going to mention it again because I think it's so important, is if you don't have experienced advisors, if they don't know what they're doing, their ignorance will cause a deal to go sideways. And I've seen this happen so many times where the advisor is in over their heads. They don't know what to do. And what they do as a result of that is they start to put up walls and because they don't know how to work their way through whatever the issue is. So again, having experienced advisors really makes a huge difference.
I like that. I just flashed on a story I haven't told for years. This is called advertising stories. So I'm supposed to have a story, I think, in each one of these. My father was in real estate and essentially in the time of Donald Trump's father. And my father told a story. He was also in real estate, and he was buying a building, and they were in a office building at 10:30 at night with the owner, the old man owner, and the old man guys go, no, let's keep going. I don't want to break. Other people said, let's go. We want to go eat dinner. We'll see you tomorrow. He said, no, we're close. We're close. Just keep going. He went to the bathroom. And a few minutes later, my father walked in the bathroom and found the old guy in a stall eating a sandwich. So, the art of negotiation, the thing that you reminded me of the buyer, you're 90% through the deal and then the buyer says, I have more things I want to negotiate or throw in, or I have more demands, reminds me of probably, and good or bad, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, trying to do a deal with Donald Trump where it's probably never over.
That can be exhausting.
Yeah.
By the way, there are. I'll make one comment about that. Experienced deal teams will have a way to help an owner identify buyers like that up front, and maybe weed them out before you ever go down the path with them. People don't change their colors at this point, and if you do a little bit of diligence, you'll get some good feedback in the marketplace, and you should be able to weed out a lot of those folks up front.
Well, that's a great answer, and obviously a clear reason to hire an expert who has 20/20 vision on these things. Let me end with something that I've got to imagine has become ever more present in deals as we're in a situation, a global economy right now where we really don't know where things are going 6, 9, 12, 24 months from now. Do most deals include some contingency in respect to something like an earnout?
If they haven't, they will going forward, for sure.
Okay.
Whether your business has suffered some decline because of the pandemic, or if your business has been a benefactor of the pandemic and is doing much better, the numbers both ways are probably not sustainable, meaning you've probably taken a dip, and unless you're in an industry that's likely not to recover, you're going to recover somewhat. And the question is, are you going to recover all the way or part of the way? And conversely, we've seen businesses that are experiencing 200-300% increases because of the pandemic, and buyers are, rightly asking, is this sustainable? And the answer is probably not, right? That business is going to come back to some normalcy. So to bridge the gap in purchase price or enterprise value expectations, earnouts are going to be a pretty big piece of every deal going forward. Either to help make up for a shortfall in value or to provide an owner upside if the business actually does maintain some higher level on a sustained basis.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the toughest decisions for a seller. And again, as you mentioned, and I discuss with my clients, I don't discuss M&A, mergers and acquisition details with them. I just tell them they should create value for the agency if you want to sell down the road. One of the things I did, and I'm not, I like to pat myself on the back. We'll leave it at that. Is that I set up the business because my acquiring agency took all of my staff, and I'm talking at this point, but it's 25, 30 people, and they needed them to run the new business. I knew that at least for 2 of the 3 years of my earnout, that the clients were going to stay put, and they did.
Yeah.
So how you set that up, and again, as you said, every deal is different. Sometimes the owner sticks around, the original owner sticks around. Sometimes they don't. It's tough. I mean, when I said roulette earlier, I mean, there's always going to be a little gamble to any of this, but it's mitigated gamble.
Yeah, and Peter, it sounds like you've done all the right things in those transactions, but there are many ways to achieve that, right? You could do stay bonuses with employees. Like, there's lots of arrows in the quiver that you can use to affect a good outcome if you have to take contingent payments in the future. And protect yourself if the buyer isn't running the business the way they should be.
I got it. Well, I like stay bonus. That I never use those terms. I just use the term the Corleone effect. I know where you live. All right. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. All right. Well, you've done a fantastic job in helping me get through some of the definitions here. This is a tough question. I'm just going to ask it. Is there any closing point that you think that a seller and or buyer needs to think about as we move into these times when we're really not sure what the hell's going on?
So I'd make 2 points. I think one is short-term and one is long-term. It's sort of evergreen. The short-term one is we've got a landscape that's uncertain at the moment on many levels. We don't know to what level we're going to see bankruptcies, how that's going to impact lenders. And without lenders, it's very, very hard, if not impossible, to do transactions. Unless you structure them in a way where you're taking a lot of future payments. So I think you've got this short-term landscape, and you have, at least in the United States, the issue of taxation. And if parties change, it looks like taxes are going to increase dramatically. So the net proceeds that an owner would get from the sale of a business is likely to take a pretty big hit. And some of our calculations that we're running right now and models that we're doing, it looks like the tax burden can go up by somewhere between 80 and 100%. That's a very substantial tax bite out of the sale proceeds. So you've got these short-term things that are going on that I think should be driving people to think about selling sooner rather than later, if they're thinking about selling at all. And then the longer term comment, which is more evergreen, is always be prepared. Run your business all the time. Or if you're in acquisition mode, always have a plan in place so that when the right opportunity presents itself, you're ready to pounce on it, and you have comfort that you're maximizing your value and minimizing your risks. Don't wait for the opportunity to show up, because then you might not have done all the things you should be doing to maximize value.
Well, I'm going to end it on that one. Yes, the Taxman. I think the Beatles wrote about that. That's my. I'll put that in the show notes for everyone under 90. Okay, Dominic, thank you very much.
Peter, really pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, good luck to you, and close those deals.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, big thanks to Dominic Rinaldi to help us all buy and sell and buy our companies. This is an interesting time, as the Chinese say. May you live in interesting times. This is the 30th episode of Advertising Stories. I want to thank all of you for doing that word of mouth thing. People are listening. That makes me feel really good. I also want to thank Secretary Mnuchin for helping to produce this episode. I'll see you guys soon.